Hi, this is a video request with a hidden agenda to it for Johnny Harris and Ben Jordan, which I will tag in the title and in the description and maybe a pinned comment. I'm going to be pointing at two videos, one of them about what is really fascism and the origin story. It's a reasonably good history of fascism, and it mostly focuses on Benito Mussolini, who effectively coined the word we use now. And another video about data centers producing audio pollution that does actually affect things. And I'm one of those people that deals with this because I'm an industrial device somewhere that way that makes ultra low frequencies. And if they're watching, which I'm sure they're not watching the video, you could just communicate this kind of ideas that I'm going to present in the video to both of them, because I'd like to see what both of them do as a take, because it kind of intersects with both of them. But a background about me. When I was younger, I went through a period of time where I caught pretty much every form of viral infection that exists. This was after I was vaccinated and before I found out that my immune system is particularly stupid about some types of infections, but fantastic at fighting others, which I think might be a common occurrence in human population. And also, I went through a period of time where they lost my vaccination records and I got extra vaccinations, all of them duplicated later in life. Now, because of the infections, this caused upper respiratory damage in every way possible, and who knows what else. This had the effect of making it to where I can hear, unfortunately, very, very low frequencies and very, very high frequencies that are way outside of the range I want. They're very distracting and annoying. And I am going to bring up that I have a somewhat like seizure disorder. I've had to deal with people claiming that they just know because they're intuitive like that, that anything I just said to you, if you're watching, must be a lie because, and then they trace it back to something that happened because of their family or somebody they knew in high school or something. But the point is, I'm the only one that knows whether or not I've gone through the tests for these things, and I do have something wrong with me that makes it to where I'm oversensitive to light frequencies and can go into what's called a petit mal seizure, and I've had one grand mal in my life. But I'm also affected by sound, visual flicker, all sorts of things. Now, more towards Ben Jordan's video, not necessarily Johnny Harris, although I'm pretty sure Johnny Harris would be familiar with this subject matter. So I'm going to bring up this now that we've gone over 2.5 minutes. Videos that have unnecessary visual effects on them that distract the viewer from what you're attempting to communicate. This is Old Man Yells at Clouds mode. But bear with me. Adding extra music during a part where we're trying to listen to what someone's saying, potentially through very, very poorly selected headphones. By the way, these are JVC earbuds. I'm not sponsored. These are the only ones I've found in the entire city I'm in that aren't crap. They have the same audio in both ears, which I require. The same spectrum, even though I didn't run it through a spectrum analyzer, but I have access to one. You know I do. And they produce most of, if not all of, the entire audio range reasonably flat to where I don't have to mess with a graphic equalizer just so I can tolerate the audio. And they were $20 or less. That used to be the standard all of us had. Now we are in enshitification mode. Now let's go to the enshitification of videos on YouTube. Making a video where you do lots of visual effects, we call that playing with the knobs. I'll explain that in a minute. Nothing wrong with it. But if you're attempting to communicate something by doing a documentary or being a documentarian or a communicator of factual data, adding any effect of any kind, I don't care what you bring up, is always bad. Unless it's a way to make it to where it's easier to digest the information for people who are overstressed, overstimulated, overwhelmed by literally the news that they might have just watched. Letting people be able to absorb the information easier, because you're trying to communicate something either that has a lot of data, some rabbit hole, or is complicated because you have to understand several concepts at once and combine them, or just simply requires an attention span above that of a nap. If you know that you're dealing with the average viewer, why would you add visual effects where the sides would flicker like this so it looks like a recording done at the wrong frame rate, like you're watching an old silent film that's been sped up so it'll work on TV? Why? Now, the answer to that is very simple. You're using Adobe products most likely, and they have all of these extra features and buttons you can play with. Or you're employing someone who did that. And for artistic reasons, to create, to set the scene because you're looking at a video from ancient times like 1990s and you apply a 15 frame a second jitter, and including, I've seen people do this with music videos. Yeah, the ones that are 30 frame a second with 60 frame per second interleave that does this with the image. Turning that into a flickery thing where they have the sound of an old style reel-to-reel film projector noise in the background to emphasize how ancient it is to look at video killed the radio star by the Buggles. They even black and white it and then add add an effect to it to where it's slightly orange, so that it looks old, filmy. Yeah. If you do these visual effects, or if you do the audio effects where you add in sound effects to a recording, and you're trying to communicate something where you really want someone to understand what the hell you're saying without distraction, don't add distractions for the rest of your damn life. It's aggravating as hell. Okay, we'll just go off on Ben Jordan. You have a video where you're showing a static image on the screen. I understand there is some school of thought in art, filmmaking, whatever, that it's film, it should move. No. It's okay that things stop moving. Don't add jitter effects to the sides. Yes, you did that at I don't know what point I had it on screen a minute ago, but I've closed it so I can prevent errors. Coincidentally, enshitifying. I'm using an operating system as old as possible to run this video recording through with the least amount running because I want it to have no technical errors. When you hear, in the old days, us technicians, I'm a computer security technician, when we say there's no technical reason for that to happen, what that means is I'm suspicious that you're being hacked or I'm suspicious that someone's doing it to be an asshole. There is no technical reason for you to add visual effects that are hearkening back to when we had to transpose and transcode 24 frame a second film to 30 frame a second video that is broadcast at 60 frame a second, interleaved back into 30 frame, which is how TV used to work under NTSC, or 25 by 50 for PAL in Britain and such. There is no technical reason to do that. Otherwise, what I'm saying is if you add that to a video on a website that quite literally doesn't have to have these problems, why? These are aberrations that we don't hearken back to. Oh, it invokes a feeling of timelessness or old-timey, or it dates it to the extreme old age of the 1990s. Yes, I take that personally. Yes, I'm old, and I see the tunnel of light whenever I see something referencing previous decades I've lived through where they misinterpret things. But adding sepia tone, flicker, and the sound of a reel-to-reel camera film projector to stuff, I'm not accusing either of them of doing it, but I've seen people do that. Back in the ancient days, I understand for humor purposes that's fine, but that was during a video exploring frame rate issues, and it wasn't showing a good example of it because you would induce it because the original recording was in the same frame rate the YouTube video is. In fact, the only problem with it is interleaved versus non-interleaved. But that was solved because, again, that was solved when they uploaded it. I used to do video editing and video cleanup, and I did film to video. I know what I'm talking about. So the visual effects where it does the jitter effect or whatever during a static picture of a document on the screen. Okay, we'll do Ben Jordan. Put up a video where you explain that was done for aesthetic reasons or whatever. What were your reasons for that? Or you had someone else do it because they're right out of college or at school, or they're doing knob twiddling. Now I'm going to bring up the knob twiddling. Knob twiddling is what we call your first video you make. I've made two. I posted them on previous channel, it's gone, where I sat down and fucked with every video editing feature I had, mostly because I wanted to see what YouTube would do when I did it. Remember, if you get the frame rate wrong at one time, it would cause the television set to overheat and possibly damage the flyback coil. I'm aware of these things. And on computer monitors, it happened often enough that I ran a sub-business just repairing monitors by replacing flyback coils and the HOT, horizontal output transistor. I was paid good money to swap out parts and then load up a piece of software on their computer that would exclude its ability to ever put out that frame rate again. There was an evil time from 1998 through 2002 where monitors blew up a lot. Well, the equivalent to that happens in my head when I see these flashing effects. I know that I'm getting close to having a petamol on some of these. But anyway, I'll bring up the knob twiddling. I did a class on how to do documentarian film of, motion picture and static film pictures, otherwise known as how not to be an idiot while you're working as a news reporter camera operator. And what that was is wide angle it, and then immediately when someone argues, I would go up and throw things at them until I said wide angle. You will repeat these words. It's like there's a movie recently that has a chant like that. Wide angle, static shot. No artist. You're not an artist, you're a documentarian. Stop it. You're going to wide angle because you're not zooming in and out and shaking the camera around for dramatic effect. This isn't Jerry Springer or some infomercial where somehow you can't handle a paper plate. You're not an artist. The way you win an award for doing incredibly good film documentation, photo documentation of a war is not to act like a fucking artist. Yeah, but you're quitting the class. What? I'm writing down you quit the class. You have to reapply. You can't get any credit. You take it because you want to. I was horrible to people. You will unlearn every bad habit. That's the whole point of this class. So they would fiddle with the knobs on the 35 millimeters. I soldered the knobs down or glued them. They would fiddle with the camera. I would go in and disconnect the board. I even made one that was I call it a taser camera. I put a buzzer on it that would make them think they were getting zapped by electricity. In one case it really was, but I don't discuss that because of legal reasons. But I would literally make them, you will stop fiddling with the knobs, you will make sure the damn thing's in focus, and you will take photos. And you will do that for the entire class. Some of them only had this as a class. That meant they spent the entire 16-hour waking day being required to buzz through all the film they paid for by taking photos and doing them perfectly. That meant they would brace against a phone pole, a utility pole, or a tree, or I taught them how to brace like they were going to fire a sniper shot and take photos. You were a tripod. If you can't do as good as a tripod, get a fucking tripod. It will replace you. If you can be replaced by a tripod, you should be. The camera has no knobs. Why? Because I either ripped them off, glued them, or soldered them. Yes, I ruined old 35 millimeter camera bodies. I know how to take them apart and clean them up. I was able to restore them in original condition. If they obeyed the rules and didn't try to fuck with the knobs, I would fix it to where they had a 35 millimeter camera because they brought it to me. Yes, I would take their camera, ruin it, hand it back to them and tell them no knobs. They weren't allowed to change the ISO. That's how much I kept them from fiddling. You will take the best shot you can under the shittiest conditions because when you're in the field and shit's happening, you're not fiddling knobs. You're trying not to die. These people were planning on going into war zones. After a while, they couldn't tolerate looking at a movie because there were so many visual effects at the time. I understand that completely. I won't even discuss what I did to the 8mm cameras. I actually feel dirty about that because I almost but not quite ruined all of them. Now they're very valuable. The point I'm making here is to Ben Jordan specifically, explain to us why you added those effects at a point where it was actually distracting from us reading. Johnny Harris, do a video about this. The enshitification or the artification of documentation. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. I'm not saying Johnny Harris did this. I'm just saying I'm suspicious he might have, and I'm thinking of doing a review of all his videos and finding every incident. Bye.